What's up, guys? Tim Little. Welcome back to Tactical Bassin. Today's video, we are talking about fall bass fishing, fall topwater fishing, some tips, some tricks, some key baits to help you catch more fish right now during that fall transition and fall topwater season. Fall time is an amazing time to catch reaction fish, especially topwater. It's probably my favorite time of the year to really put down all the other rods and pick up topwater, because honestly, it doesn't get much better than topwater explosions. When you get 2, 3, 5, 10-pound bass coming out of the water to eat your bait, it gets the heart pumping, and you will remember that for the rest of your life. Some of those bites you get will be in the back of your head every time you're fishing a topwater, every time you're back out on the water. But fall time is an amazing time to get out. You know, as we've talked about in previous videos, these fish are all about bait. They're gonna have them pushed up shallow in the backs of coves. They're gonna be out in the middle of the lake if they're spotted bass, pushing those big bait balls. And today I'm gonna talk about some key tips to help you take advantage of those fish that are really targeting those bait fish. Got, like I said, some tips about some hook placements, some colors, adding some rattles and weights, all sorts of goodies for you. It doesn't matter if you're a grass fisherman or an open water fisherman, if you're a buzz bait fisherman or a walking bait fisherman. Today's video, I'm gonna cover a bunch of stuff to help you guys out. So, real quick, shallow fish, open water fish. Those are going to kind of be the two different categories. Shallow fish, you're going to be in your grass. You're going to be fishing your shorelines with your walking baits, your buzz baits, your Whopper Ploppers, that sort of stuff. You're going to be covering a lot more water. Open water fish, you're going to be fishing island tops, humps, and more importantly, bait balls. As those fish get those big bait balls congregated out in open water and they come up blasting, you know, throwing a walking bait or a popper will really turn good days into great days if you're trying to catch them on topwater. So fast moving baits typically are going to be my shallow baits. Like I said, running that shoreline or running that grass, you're gonna want to cover a lot of water. Again, it's all about finding those schooling fish, those active fish, and let's start off with it. So Whopper Plopper, obviously, if you guys don't know what a Whopper Plopper is, it is a topwater bait with a soft propeller on the back. It's casting and burning it back. It's gonna plop, 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 plop. It can have a lot of disruption, a lot of disturbance on the surface, and really gets aggressive bites. But again, I typically don't throw this offshore too often unless I'm chasing big spotted bass. But I'm gonna be running and gunning. I'm gonna be pounding that shoreline, just cast after cast after cast, you know, looking at the shoreline, looking for those key pieces of habitat, key pieces of structure that are going to be holding those fish. So laydowns, dock pilings, shade lines. But again, it's just cast, reel, and you're just covering water. And once you get in an area where you start getting multiple blowups, then you can slow down and pick up your other baits if possible. If you're not in the grass, then you can pick up your slower poppers and walking baits. But typically, a Whopper Plopper or some kind of buzz bait is what I'm going to be throwing shallow. Or if there's some kind of ripple on the water, if there's a little bit of chop on the water, I typically go away from that walking bait and I go with more of a cast and retrieve bait. Again, that buzz bait, that Whopper Plopper, those style of baits put a lot more disturbance on the water than your traditional walking bait, you know, your side to side walk the dog type topwaters. So shallow or ripple on the water, that's when I'm going with the buzz bait or the Whopper Plopper. Now, a couple tips for you if you're throwing a buzz bait. Well, let's cover colors really quickly. Typically on buzz baits, I go either, really 3 colors, either some kind of white or bait fish, a black, or you guys know that I like that black with red. And I'll link some of my favorites down below in the video description. But I like subtle buzz baits. You know, most people throw a big, loud, metal, clacking, double buzz bait. You know, you can fish it slower, but I really like the plastic blades. I like that more subtle action. Another tip for you, add some kind of either frog or swim bait, so some kind of toad or swim bait as your trailer. That lets you go a little bit slower with that single blade. It doesn't have as much blade keeping that bait up, so it wants to sink a little faster, so that will help slow that, help kind of balance that out. The other thing that I really love doing is just throwing a single swim bait on there. I really like the Dirty Jigs, their Canterbury Buzz. It actually has the weight on the shank of the bait that goes inside the swim bait head. This is actually the big bite baits, a little bit smaller blade, but the D-Walker, that is a must. It's a lot more, not solid, but it's a lot more, it just lasts a lot longer than any of your typical Kitech type swim baits. But that D-Walker paired up with that Dirty Jigs or that big bite, just no skirt, just the blade, and just that swim bait mimicking those shad is a killer bait this time of the year. So that's probably hands down my favorite type of buzz bait, especially if I'm fishing grass lines, I'm fishing the back of a pocket where those fish have those bait pinned. That guy right there is money. But again, I will link some of my favorites down below in the video description. So add a swim bait or add some kind of toad style bait to your buzz baits to help keep those baits up. And then if you need to go super subtle, again, go with some kind of like just your basic horny toad on a some kind of twist lock hook. I'll link all that stuff down below in the video description. But shallow, that's what I'm doing. I'm doing Whopper Ploppers and buzz baits. Now, if there is a specific laydown or something that I'm target casting to, you know, the benefit of these guys is you get to cover a lot of water. On the flip side, if you are target casting a specific area, you don't want to cover a lot of water. You want to be in that strike zone as long as possible. That is when I'll go with either a popper or a walking bait. Typically, I'll start with a popper. Now, this popper specifically, this is the Megabass Pop Max in Matte Shad. Now, the reason I talk about this one specifically, I'm holding this one up. Last year, there was about a month and a half, 2-month period where the only topwater bait out of all of these baits that I could actually get bit on was this guy right here. You know, it's all about the bait fish. It's matching the hatch right. That matte shad is a really cool color. I don't know. You know, what's cool about this Pop Max is it does have the cupped face with the slits in it, so it adds a little bit of a bubble trail. But something about this bait just gets bit, so couldn't not do this video without talking about that specific bait right there. But again, if you're target casting a specific piece of cover, or say it's a shade line off of a dock, or a tule line, there's a shade line, you're making that exact cast and you want to keep that bait in that strike zone as long as possible, throw that popper out there. Bloop, bloop, let it sit, or walk it. Bloop, 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 bloop. Get that thing going side to side. You know, you're not going crazy fast like you would your traditional walk the dog style of bait, and you're not burning it like you would with the Whopper Plopper or the buzz bait, but you can just be more subtle if those fish want it. So that is typically my 1, 2, and 3 punch for my shallow fish. Now, grass fish, that's a completely different story. You know, if you're fishing out here behind me, right? I got a couple boats behind me. You're out here fishing this grass. You know, these fish could be anywhere. I mean, I got a half a mile of grass. So a key tip for you guys. You hear this? Here's standard. Take, you know, we've been doing this for many years. Back in the day, we were talking like little small split shot, but the problem with putting a bunch of small split shot into your frog is eventually it eats that frog from the inside out. Today, we got tungsten. A lot heavier, a lot smaller, so you can get it in these frogs and you don't have to use as much. But I have 3/4 of an ounce in this big Spro frog right here. I can cast this 20, 30 yards farther than I could without the weight in it. And it's gonna disrupt the surface more than your weightless frog. Now, it's gonna sit deeper in the water, it's gonna compress more of that grass, and it's gonna show you where those fish are at. So a little 1-2 punch for you guys. You know, you can do it with the lead, like I said. If you can, do it with the tungsten. Easiest way is pull the frog back, flip over the hook, and you'll see the little hole right here. That's the hole that the water comes out of when you squeeze. I like the cylinder type tungsten weights, and I will stick these right in here. I'm not going to do it on this frog right now, but the benefit of doing it, one, you add sound, you add weight. So when you cast this thing all the way to shore, now you can just reel it. You can cover water quickly, and it's going to make more of a disruption on the surface. So it's going to show you where those fish are. Now, the downside is a lot of times they miss it because you're just throwing it out there and you're just reeling it back. You're just covering water, right? But you get a blow up right here, that's when you pick up the traditional frog, fire right back in there, twitch, let it sit. More than half the time they'll come and show themselves with that weighted frog, and then you get in there with the unweighted frog and they will eat it. So a little tip for you guys, if you guys haven't tried that, you're gonna have to play around with the different weights on the different frogs. Obviously this is the King Daddy, that's a lot bigger frog than your traditional frog, right? So like I said, I have 3/4 of an ounce in here, and it sits in open water, it sits down about like this. But again, I'm looking for cheese, I'm looking for mats. That's when this really shines. If you wanna do it with your smaller 65 size frogs, take your weights, fill up your kitchen sink or your bathroom sink, and add weight until that frog gets just where it's still floating. You don't wanna sink it, right? But the benefit of having 2 or multiple in there is you get that banging rattle sound. Another tip for you, take your favorite jig rattle, you know, those cylinder jig rattles, and you can put those in as well and add rattle to them. So again, if it's real thick grass, I'm gonna throw some kind of frog with some heavy weight in there, and I'm gonna cast and reel just like I normally would with a Whopper Plopper, and I'm just gonna pick this area apart. Again, I'm looking for those key differences, the different types of grass, shade line. Maybe there's some wood sticking up, got a bird over here, so maybe there's some hard structure in the grass. I'll slow down and fish those differently, but for the most part, I'm just casting and reeling that thing back to try and get those fish to show me where they are. If it's not that thick of grass, that's when these guys, you know, that Spro flapping frog you guys saw in a recent video just messed them up on that guy right there. Or the Teckle. Again, quick moving frogs, a lot of times they're gonna miss it. Have a follow-up frog, a slower traditional walk the dog type frog. You know, either your Spro or your Bullywaz. You know, I'll link my favorite colors and frogs down below in the video description, but some kind of walking frog that when you burn this thing across the mat or you're moving it quickly across the mat and they blow up and miss, put that rod down, pick up your other frog, get right back in there and let it sit. If you can, a Senko is a great follow-up bait as well, but a lot of times it's hard getting those fish out of that grass with a finesse rod or a Senko. So either go heavy line, heavy hook, heavy rod to get those fish out, but that slower frog is an awesome follow-up bait. So that is grass. You know, guys, don't be afraid. You know, some frogs are gonna have a bigger hole down here than others. Like I said, if you take the frog, pull it away from the hook and rotate it, gives you a little bit more space to work with. You know, some frogs have little inserts in there you can't do it with, but just pay attention and you know, make a couple, 2 or 3 of them that you have as your heavier frogs. You can even write the weight on the top if you want. That way you remember, you know, 1/2 ounce, 1/4 ounce, 3/4 ounce. But give it a try next time you're out fishing lots and lots of grass. It'll be a lot easier to find those fish. But again, that is the shallow fish. Now let's talk about open water fish or fish that are out over deeper water, not grass. So hands down, my favorite type of bait to throw in that category or that situation is gonna be some kind of walking bait. You know, I've talked about it in recent videos. That walking bait just has that real side-to-side action, just has so much more drawing power for me in open water than a Whopper Plopper or a buzzbait. You know, I typically don't throw those out there. It's either going to be a popper or some kind of walking bait. Now, you can see right here I have the River Sea Rover held up. The reason I'm holding up these two, depending on the species that you are targeting, you can do some things to make sure or to put the odds and the ratio in your favor to get those fish in the boat. If I am fishing a spotted bass fishery or a smallmouth fishery, 100% of the time, I'm going with a bait, if possible, that has 3 hooks. You know, a lot of time those fish are coming up hard, they're coming up quick, and they're just slashing at the bait. So I want to put as many hook points out there as possible to hopefully get those fish hooked up and keep them pinned to get them in the boat. You know, a lot of times those fish come up and they will literally just hit your bait with their mouth closed and send your bait flying. I've seen, you know, 2-3 feet out of the water that topwater goes flying. So little tip for you, if they're doing that, don't get in the habit of swinging. If they hit that bait or you get a big blow up, just kind of reel and lean into it. If you feel the pressure, then kind of load up and set. But if they blow up and you set and you just threw your bait, you know, 8-10 feet closer to you from the fish, a lot of times they won't get it. But right now with those fish schooling up, you throw out there, you're walking, boosh, and they miss. Either let it sit there or twitch it. Don't yank it or even reel it a little bit. And a lot of times that second, third, fourth, fifth fish will come over and eat it too. You can catch doubles, you can catch multiple fish at once, but just train yourself not to set on the blowups, especially this time of the year. You know, check, make sure that weight's there, and then load up on them. But again, if I'm going largemouth fishing, I will get rid of that 3rd hook, and I will go upsize with my 2 hooks. Obviously, largemouth, a lot bigger mouths. They just suck that bait in, and you can get away with more stout hooks. You can get away with bigger hooks. So again, largemouth fisheries, I'm always going two hooks. You know, like I said, you can upsize the front hook. You can go with a red hook. Now we've taught this for many years. The red hook is not that it looks like a wounded topwater or a wounded or bleeding topwater. What it is, it's a bullseye. It gives that fish something to focus on. As this bait's going side to side, you know, it just, we've played around with it on topwater baits, on crankbaits. You know, you start changing the hook placement of that red hook, and I'll say 7 out of 10 times those fish get that red hook. Again, they're tracking that bait and they're keying in on something, so it just gives them something to target. You know, like I said, we've played around with hook placement before with red hooks, but if I'm going with some kind of natural color, they don't really see it very well. You can add that red hook in the front to make sure that they're targeting that big front hook. And then again, some baits don't come with feathered trebles on the back, so go out and get yourself either some Owners or Gamakatsu. Both companies make feathered trebles, trailer hooks, and add those to the rear of your bait. The benefit of those, again, when you get blown up on and you miss and your bait hits the water, it's not moving, but that feather's back there dancing. It just adds that secondary movement to your bait, and I just have a ton of confidence with adding a feather to the back. So again, spotted or smallmouth, I'm going a 3 hook setup. Largemouth, I'm going an upsized 2 hook setup. Now, as far as colors, I just held up 3 different colors. I typically keep it fairly simple. Some kind of ghost or shad baitfish color. This is actually rainbow trout, but it's got some flash to it. Chrome, some kind of chrome flashy bait. A bone, and some kind of chartreuse. That's it. One of those 4, and depending on the day, depending on the sun, if the sun's out, the cloud cover, one of those 4 colors will work better than the other 3 on that given day, given those circumstances. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, tip to give you, and then we'll talk about a couple other baits I want you guys to check out. If you guys love throwing your traditional walking baits, that's that Shower Blows 105. You guys have seen, heard how much we love those baits. A front runner. You know, this is an old school front runner. I'll link some of some new products that work as well. You can't really get your hands on these. I just have a ton of backstock from growing up throwing them. But a front runner and your walking bait. How this works: you have your main line tied to the front of this with a 10, 12, 16, 18 inch leader, depending on what you want. The shorter I won't say the shorter the better, but if you go too long, it kind of contradicts what you want. It doesn't work as well. What you want this front runner going left, or I'm sorry, right, and this bait going left. It's gonna walk the dog, and it looks like your bait is chasing another bait. So if you are in an area where you have multiple fish, a lot of times you can catch more than one fish at a time. I've actually caught 3 fish at one time, 1 fish on the front runner and 2 on the back bait before. But a front runner is just, it just gives that bait a little different look. You know, those fish have seen your traditional walking baits, but adding that bait and that directional change in front of that bait works really, really well. Now, 2 other baits that I wanted to talk about that I forgot in the, well, one is in the Whopper Plopper / walking bait category, and that's what makes it so special. That's the Savage Gear Prop Walker. It's a pencil style bait, your traditional walking bait, but on the back of it, it has 2 cups that open up, so then you can cast and reel it, and it's like a Whopper Plopper. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. I love that bait and forgot it. And then the other bait I wanted to talk about in the buzz baits was the Zorro baits, the Head Knocker. It's a really cool buzz bait that you can play with the angle of the blade itself, bend it down to make sure it hits the head, the lead part of the buzz bait to make a clacker sound. Or if you want to go more subtle, then bend it up and get that blade away from the head, and it'll be more subtle like your single blade buzz baits. But guys, fall time is an amazing time to get out and throw topwater. You know, most of the time that is what I'm starting with. I'm starting with either some kind of fast moving bait up shallow or some kind of walking bait offshore, and I am looking for fish that are feeding, that are blowing up on bait, showing themselves, and just having a ball throwing topwater. You know, I live for this time of the year. You know, early spring, fall, great times for throwing topwater. And, you know, summertime, you throw the frog and do all that stuff. But right now, with those bait fish really getting balled up and those fish aggressively feeding, you know, it's summertime topwater fishing times 10. It's just so much better. So hopefully these tips will help you out. You know, don't get stuck in the rut of throwing your same favorite, you know, Super Spook or your Sammy or your Vixen or your Rover. You know, switch things up. You know, one thing I didn't really talk about is sound. You know, different baits have different sounds. So, you know, play around with colors, play around with sound, play around with size if you need to. You know, the other day I was out fishing, throwing a normal size topwater bait, and those fish were eating it, but they weren't getting it. I had to downsize. So play around with size. You know, this is that little 105 size. I'm all hooked up here. Shower blows, you guys know that we love the shower blows. The Rover is an amazing bait. You can get that in smaller sizes. So take your favorite baits and get the smaller sizes, the 105 sizes, you know, or the 77 sizes. Play around with the sizes, play around with the sounds, and play around with one of those 4 colors, and you guys will start converting more topwater blowups into catches. If you guys have any questions, please leave those down below in the comment section. Hopefully this video got you fired up to get out on the lake or the pond or whatever it may be and throw some topwater, because it is go time. Again, if you guys like this video, thumbs up. Remember to subscribe. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching. Have a good one.